The very habit that we have of assuming self-nature to be inherently real and reacting with hope, fear, want, not want, whatever, to our environment and the things in it constantly perpetuates itself. So we are taught instead to consider the welfare of all sentient beings. As we talked about earlier, consider the faults of cyclic existence, and based on that, wanting to make oneself useful in some way, wanting to be of benefit, that awakening of compassion. One way to practice that is by offering the self, offering self-nature, transforming it into something that is useful to sentient beings. So how can we do that as we're walking around? Again, try to remember that we're practicing recognition. When you see your hand, you're used to the way it looks. Here's a great way to think about it. Have you heard about the guy recently who had a cadaver hand sewn onto his, and it's working? Now, those of you that have heard about that, how did you think about that? You went, ugh. I mean, it sounds amazing in one way, doesn't it? That somebody who didn't have a hand now has a hand. But it's not his hand. So the idea, we think about, that's kind of gnarly, you know? I mean, you know what your hand looks like. You've seen it your whole life. It changes, but it's your beloved hand. So recognizable. It has a certain shape, and it feels a certain way. Well, now supposing you had an unmatched set, and one of them was not your hand. Think how you'd feel. This kind of clinging is so automatic that until we hear something like that, we don't even know we do it. We don't even know we do it. It is the basis for our recognizing ourselves and one another as selves. We grow attached to the shape of our face, the shape of our head, the way, even if we don't like the shape of our face and the shape of our head, we grow attached to it because it is us, we think. And so it constantly perpetuates that idea of self-nature being inherently real. It constantly perpetuates that ego clinging. Our bodies, they are for us something that we have to protect. And even if you think that, oh, I'm very brave, I'm not afraid of being hurt, I'm not afraid of even losing my life. Baloney. I'll start chopping, and you tell me where to stop. We protect our bodies. If anything comes around to us, we go, ah! And if we can't protect ourselves any other way, we protect our head. Because that's the part that keeps us going, we think. So we have this automatic clinging. Any sense of recognition of oneself as self is a clinging kind of phenomena. So to antidote that, we practice this chud. Boiling, separating all the parts. And when you're separating all the parts, you can ask yourself, well, what part am I? The skin, or the bones, or the fat, or the muscle, or the brains, or the tongue, or the eyeballs? Which part am I? And of course, we begin to learn that that question is not answerable. Because I, or self-nature, is simply a concept. It's simply a concept. How can we practice this as we walk around through our lives? Well, one way to do that is when you've developed the habit of when you notice yourself, and do you notice yourself? You notice yourself constantly. It's all you notice. So we notice our hands, we notice the position that we're in. We constantly move to be in a different position, don't we? We think, do I want my hand like this or like this? Or like this? Or like that? Or like that? You know? Constantly doing that. It's just a constant phenomena. Supposing we were to develop the habit of considering the hand. Well, this one matches that one. I like that. But considering our hands. What if we were to consider our hands in this way? Thinking, this hand, instead of thinking this hand is mine and it looks like this, think, how can this hand be a benefit to sentient beings? What use is this hand? Consider it. You could develop a sense of recognition of what the nature of our body parts actually is. You can think to yourself, you know what I like best about me? I like my, I don't know, what part do I like best? I like my eyes, okay? I really like my eyes. I like your eyes too. But I like my eyes. And so when I think about that, I think, oh, you know, wherever I go, I have these eyes, and they can see. That's really cool. And other people can see me, and I can work those eyes. Can't I? And that's really something. We think of that, all we know is that our sight, our eyes, that's part of us, that's us. We cling to that. Supposing we were able to understand our eyes in a different way. Supposing when we think of our eyes and how wonderful the capacity to see is, or how amazing it is that we can express ourselves with our eyes. When we think about our eyes, we can offer that entire scenario, that entire experience to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas for the benefit of sentient beings. And so your relationship to your own body parts, your own eyes, for instance, your own hand, becomes different, rather than thinking, these are my brown eyes and I have great brown eyes, or this is my right hand, it's a great right hand. Rather than thinking like that as an extension of our ego, we can develop the habit of saying, of offering the whole phenomena of sight, the whole relationship to our different body parts, our eyes, by evaluating how it is that these eyes can benefit sentient beings and how it is that we can offer them. Before I ever learned about the Buddha Dharma, I actually used to do a natural kind of chud. My teachers told me that this was a natural kind of chud that I did. What I would do is I would actually meditate, and it took me months and months and months to do this. I practiced it for months because I felt like the deeper I went into it, the more involved it became. And what I would do is I would think about a certain body part, like my feet. And I would say, well, thinking of these feet in one way, here are its limitations. And it's easy to see what the limitations of feet are. You can't walk on fire with them. Well, not most of us. You can't walk on water with them. Not most of us either. There's so many things you can't do with your feet. But there are also many things that you can do with your feet. And so thinking of your feet in those ways, what I would do is I would see all of the feet limitations being used as they are presently being used. And then I think about all the possible ways that feet could be of benefit to beings. How could my feet be of use? In that way, that's what I want. I want my feet to be of use. So I would think, how can my feet be of use? Well, I can go to people that need me with my feet. I can go to do some meditation. I can make my body comfort someone that's sick or feed someone that's hungry through moving my feet. So after I had examined both the downside and the opportunity associated with feet, then after that I would practice this kind of deep offering, and I would make many prayers. I would say, I offer my feet to, back then I didn't say Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, I said to absolute nature. But I offer my feet to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas in order that they might be used to benefit sentient beings. Other than that, they have no meaning for me, and I would practice that until I felt like I had given up my feet. They were no longer mine. Thinking about them is a moot point. They're offerings. And I went through my entire body. And then I found that wasn't enough. I went through all my emotions. And then I found that wasn't enough, and I went through all the different ways of thinking and attributes of mind. And I would see the potential of each, and I would see the downfall of each, and I would meditate on that very carefully, contemplate rather, on that very, very carefully. And then I would spend quite a great deal of time offering that particular quality or attribute or body part to be used for the benefit of sentient beings, to be used to accomplish some good. It seemed to me that, generally speaking, the body is a marvelous thing, but if it's not accomplishing any good, it's kind of limited. And so it seemed logical and reasonable to me to want to offer all of my limitations, all of my ordinary perceptions, all of my attachments, in the hope that every part of me would be used to benefit sentient beings. So, even if you think about your speech, speech is a wonderful thing. It's an amazing thing. It's one of those human, again, those human attributes that also makes it possible for us to teach and learn. So it makes it possible for us to practice Dharma. So speech is an amazing thing, but what do we use our speech for? For the most part, we use our speech to help us suffer. For the most part, we use our speech like vomit coming out of our mouths. I mean, the stuff that comes out of our mouths often is not connected to a thought anywhere. We use our speech for blah, 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 blah. And yet this precious thing could be used to teach Dharma. This precious capability could be used to receive teachings of Dharma. How amazing! When I practiced this kind of non-traditional chud, that was when I really learned about speech. That was really important. When I learned about speech, I found out that if I were to really offer my speech and be constantly mindful of its power, constantly mindful of this blessing, and if I've really ultimately offered my speech to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, that instead their holy speech might be there. That makes the speech worth something. That makes it powerful. That makes it worth something. So that's how I used to consider. I used to spend a lot of time considering the pros and cons, the limitations and the attributes of different aspects of what I considered myself. And eventually, after offering all my parts and all my qualities and all my different whatevers, all my different attributes, at that point I felt that something was changed. I had done this so deeply that I got into the habit of thinking like this, like when it comes to benefiting sentient beings, I don't have to make that choice because it's already been made. I don't own this stuff. It's already given away. I developed this habit of constantly offering. And the reason why I'm telling you about the way that I did this is not so that you can go, ooh, wasn't she a great practitioner? I'm not a great practitioner by any means. What I'm telling you is that as a Westerner, even if we don't have perfect translations, even if we haven't accumulated all the teachings, even if it seems to us somehow strange to practice chud in a way where we boil stuff and offer it and, you know, all those things, even if we've never heard of that teaching, it is still possible for us to practice the same principles and to establish a sacred view. It's still possible. You know, I feel like my main job is to speak to Westerners, because Westerners have a particular outlook, particular take on things. And I think one of the greatest blessings that I have is that I'm a Westerner and I think like you. You know, I really do think exactly like you. So maybe I can help you not just to follow the books by rote, not just to repeat everything like a magpie, but maybe instead to practice more deeply. To practice in such a way that the practice becomes married with your life, with your body, with your spirit, speech, with your mind, with your consciousness, that they are so one that it's like mixing milk with water. That is how practice becomes potent. Now, as human beings, some of the greatest downfalls and difficulties we have, and the ones that stop us dead in our tracks, are the constant messages that we have about how we should be and how we shouldn't be, and the self-imposed kinds of structures or ideas regarding how we should be. When we have that and we fail to come up to these standards and these ideals, the guilt that we have is so profound that it stops us dead in our tracks and we feel worthless. And this whole neurotic scenario begins about worthlessness. And it is absolutely the opposite from the kind of practice that we want to do. You know, we may think that as spiritual people we should feel like nothing, humble. Well, try to understand it a little differently. If you're walking around superimposing an idea on yourself and you're feeling like worthless and guilty and nothing, that's not really spiritual. One is supposed to be in a state of recognition, not in a state of neuroses. So it's this guilt, it's this feeling of having all these ideas of how we should be in this materialistic society, and this feeling that we are criminal if we don't do them. That idea is very much all pervasive. Witness as a mother, as a parent, when you have small children. You know what it's like when you develop that cord between yourself and your child, where they become little satellites and they're out there, but there's this cord there's this connection between the mother and the child, so that if the child is no longer in your sight, as a mother, you react to that pulls the cord. And so there was this big feeling of, oh, I've got to take care of my child, and I have to make sure my child is safe. I have to supervise my child. So if we, for one moment, react differently to that feeling, or respond differently to it, or perhaps not quickly enough, or if there's a moment of confusion or whatever it is, we immediately criminalize ourselves. we immediately think of ourselves as criminals. And we immediately think the first thing you do is hide that. And then we carry around this block of guilt and criminal feelings that makes us act out in certain ways that are unfortunate. Training the mind to constantly be in a state of offering, to constantly be in a state of more and more increasing recognition, is a way to circumvent that whole criminalizing that happens to us, that whole criminal thing, that whole guilt thing. To be able to gain a deeper recognition of the nature of phenomena, to be able to gain a deeper recognition of what is sacred and what is ordinary, to be able to gain a deeper recognition of what is meaningful and should be gathered and what should be abandoned. You know, to gain a better recognition of the faults of cyclic existence, to be able to distinguish between a diamond and a piece of glass. To train oneself in that way moves us out of that realm of being ego in the center of our own mandala, constantly being good or bad, blaming, judging, being hopeful or fearful, that constant neurotic scenario that ultimately, when you really look at it, that's what we call us. That whole neurotic scenario. In training the mind to a deeper recognition as an extension to one's practice, like I've been describing, and to practice constantly as we move around. This is an antidote that is extremely powerful. Even in terms of, you think about how our minds work when do you ever try to just like sit down and just like still the mind and just just kind of relax and go blank? Did you ever try to do that? To try to get your mind to do that is like screaming at a monkey in a cage to stop jumping up and down. What do you think is going to happen? Monkey's going to go even crazier. So, in practicing in the way that I've described, constantly offering and not clinging, therefore applying the antidote to clinging, constantly moving deeper and deeper into a state of better recognition, rather than deeper and deeper into ego clinging, self-cherishing, and neuroses. What happens is it actually calms the mind. It calms the mind, and it's like it begins to apply the remedy or the medicine that makes our minds change from something that is inflamed to something that is much more relaxed. So that our minds actually begin to change. That happens in our sit-down practice. And that also happens in our mindfulness as we walk around. One other aspect of this constant mindfulness can be, it's sort of like hand in glove with offering, and that is gratitude. When you think about all phenomena, you think about beautiful flowers, beautiful trees, beautiful stuff, all our great stuff. You think about all of our beautiful stuff and the appearances of all phenomena. Supposing you were able to develop the habit of thinking like this: how great must be the Buddha nature, that this display of the Buddha nature is so beautiful. This gratefulness. It's not like, thank you God for everything. It's not like that. It's like this response, this joyfulness, this recognition to see that the nature that is our deepest, most profound nature, the nature that is all-pervasive, the nature that is our Buddha nature, is actually inherent in all appearances. How amazing! You know, to acknowledge that, to move into any kind of recognition of that is so amazing. To think that that we are somehow connected. How amazing. A sense of wonder that encourages you not just to see and react in a dull and stupid way, but to perceive more deeply. So by doing that, we develop the habit of letting the mind be more profound, letting the mind reach its depth. And consequently, one's practice becomes ever so much more profound. And our level of recognition becomes ever so much more deepened. This sense of gratitude, ultimately, as we begin to practice an awareness of the emptiness of all phenomena and the inherent nature that is the heart of all phenomena. As we begin to think like that, perhaps we can say, in every time we take beauty into our eyes, every time that we see beauty and we have the opportunity to offer that beauty, that is Guru Rinpoche's blessing. This is Guru Rinpoche speaking to me. If I see this beauty, and now I have, because of that, the opportunity to offer this beauty to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas for the liberation and salvation of all sentient beings. If I have a marvelous personal experience and I remember to offer the joy of that experience for the sake of sentient beings, or to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, however you like to think about it, to be able to do that, in that moment, you are with Guru Rinpoche. Guru Rinpoche is speaking to you. If we somehow learn to recognize the intrinsic nature of phenomena, isn't that like learning to see the face of the Guru? What's important about this is the power that we have to practice this way. In ordinary situations, if you love somebody, they can be taken away from you. They themselves can walk away from you. You could lose them. But in this kind of thinking and in this kind of practice, this kind of mindfulness, no one can ever take the appearance of Guru Rinpoche away from you. No one can ever, nothing on this earth has the power to hide from you, to keep from you the face of the Guru. So if you're able to look at our environment, you go out here and you think, oh, this is so beautiful, such a beautiful place, and you're able to really offer it and feel that blissfulness of just letting go and surrendering all the beauty that you see to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, praying that somehow that virtue will be used to benefit beings, praying that all of that virtue will go to nourish sentient beings, then you are in the very arms of the Guru. You are not separate from the Guru. You see, in ordinary relationships, someone can take them away from you. All samsara has power over that. And there's not a thing you can do about it. How amazing to distinguish between that and the extraordinary relationship that is brought about through mindfulness and recognition. This one relationship that nobody on this earth, even Guru Rinpoche himself, could take away from you. Not that he'd want to. So we have this extraordinary opportunity to get past, remember, going back to the recognition and mindfulness in our Guru Yoga. Remember how I've taught you that ultimately the practice of Guru Yoga helps us to recognize our own nature. To recognize our primordial wisdom nature as being inseparable from the teacher. How amazing to use this practice of recognition in such a way as to expedite all of that and make it so much more profound and so much more meaningful. Instead of reacting constantly as we are habitually prepared to do. How amazing if even once, twice, 3 times in one day, in 1 week, we can practice that recognition and remove ourselves from that scenario, using the appearance of phenomena and our reaction to it as a way to see the face of the Guru. How amazing. For many of you, I know that when we first started this temple, it was like family style, you know? And you thought of yourselves as your children, and I thought of myself as your mother in many ways. And there's a spiritual family dynamic. We started small and we got big. So for many of the people who have always been around, who have been practicing really with me for about 15 years now, or 15 aeons it seems like, for many of you, my going away to my physical movement, if you will, from Poolesville, Maryland to Sedona, Arizona, has been an extremely painful thing. If that is the case, it's not that I don't have compassion for you, but if that is the case, I'm telling you, you are not practicing correctly. There is nothing on this earth, including me, that can take away from you your Guru, that can take away from you that recognition, that relationship. Nothing can do that. There is nothing that can take Guru Rinpoche's blessing away from you, that marvelous connection. Nothing can do that. Nothing has that power. If you think that your teacher is absent, then you are absent. It's like the sun and the earth. When we see night and day, when we were younger as a species, we thought that when nighttime came, the sun disappeared. It fell off the edge, and it wasn't there anymore. And then later on it came back. And we liked it better when the sun was there because we could see better, and it felt warm on our skin. and it was safer. But really what's happened, we later found out, is that the sun is staying right where it is, constantly shining. It's the earth that cyclically turns away. And it's the same way with our relationship with our teachers. To the degree that we keep the mindfulness, to the degree that we practice recognition, to the degree that we are willing to see the Guru in all things, in every opportunity, and utilize that opportunity. To that degree, we experience oneness, non-duality with our teachers. And we also experience some kind of awakening as to our own primordial wisdom nature. To the degree that we practice that recognition. If you think that your teacher is not with you most of the time, then I have to say you are not with your practice most of the time. We have to get past making our egos and the appearances that go with that, the phenomena of ego clinging, the center of the mandala of our activity. We have to stop doing that. To move past appearances into a deeper recognition through constant mindfulness. This is the way. This is the way. To practice that as an extension to our sit-down practice. This is the way. And to the degree that we awaken our capacity to recognize, we are held inseparable from the very heart of Guru Rinpoche. Don't waste your time as a practitioner thinking, oh, now my teacher moved away, so now I am lonely. Now she's there and I'm here, or he's there and I'm here, or whatever. Don't waste your time. You're accumulating the mantra of samsara if you do that. You are accumulating appearances. You are just thickening the delusion, just thickening it. Instead, to practice this recognition. You know, to practice the recognition of one's own nature being totally inseparable from the Guru. To practice the recognition of that to such an extent that you feel in every moment the king of that moment is Guru Rinpoche. In every breath, the queen of that breath is Guru Rinpoche. Yes, the queen. Everything. You know, it's like whatever ideas that we have, to think every movement, every experience, through our practice, through our determination to practice recognition, the king of that experience is the Guru. The heart, the essence of that experience is the Guru. More and more we become awake. It is possible to practice in that way with such fervent regard that in every future lifetime that presence will not be denied you. In this and every future lifetime, and I know this to be true, that presence will never be denied you. There is no way that as we accomplish recognition, the primordial wisdom nature can be kept from you. Again and again, it will be recognized as the seed and the fruit of every moment, every bit of experience. But it only works if you work it. So this tendency that we have to keep our minds satisfied with simply fulfilling the form, and then going on to be lazy and slothful, reacting to appearances, simply accepting things at the most, superficial, apparent level. This is a mistake. I can tell you, wait, let me see, I'm trying to think of an analogy. How can I make this real for you? Okay, when I first met His Holiness Penna Rinpoche, this is my favorite thing. I just really think this is so amazing. When I first met His Holiness Penna Rinpoche, somehow he heard about me and he wanted to come to where I was. And when he first came to where I was in Kensington, Maryland, he just came there and he wanted to stay at our house. And really, I had only met one Tibetan in my whole life. I had no idea what a Tibetan Lama even was. I had no idea what to do with a Tibetan Lama. Where do you put them? What do they eat? I had no idea. And I wasn't being silly, I just didn't know. So I thought, well, we'll have a barbecue. I didn't know what to do. And I remember and I think about the way I was then. It was, of course, it was natural. I'm sure it was quite adorable, but there was His Holiness sitting on a bench. His Holiness sitting on a bench. And I remember plopping down right next to him and going, so what do you think of the barbecue? If I did that now, my head would explode. Thankfully, some spiritual discrimination has been developed. During that visit, His Holiness said he wanted to talk to all of my students. And he wanted to ask them some questions, and he asked all of my students, what does she teach you? What do you know about this, that, and the other thing? What do you know about, what do you think about compassion? What does she tell you to do? How does she tell you to practice? So he went through all my students and he asked them what she was teaching you. And then when he had seen all my students, and I hadn't even talked to him alone yet. I mean, I didn't know that you were even supposed to, I didn't even know you're supposed to ask Tibetan Lamas questions. I just didn't know. So I saw that when he was interviewing my students, they also had the opportunity to ask him these great questions. And he gave them these really cool answers, like about karma and how things are and why things were. And I thought, well, I'd like a shot at that, boy, I'll tell you. So give me the opportunity. And so I asked His Holiness, could I come and talk to you? And he said, he said, sure. So I went in and I talked to him, and I said, Rinpoche, I said, when I first saw you, I knew that you were purity itself, that there is nothing more pure than you. And so based on that, I'm asking you, at a certain age, it just came to me to start teaching like this, teaching about emptiness, teaching about compassion, teaching about benefiting others. But I wasn't taught this. I had, until you, I didn't have a teacher in this lifetime. How can this be? Have I done something wrong? And I said, really, I felt like there were two justifications for me to teach before I had met my teacher. One of them was that when these practices, like this natural kind of chud that I was doing, came to my mind, and I did them, they worked. I could feel the renunciation that was happening. I could feel it. So that was one determining factor. I could feel that this kind of thing worked. And when I spent a large percentage of my time trying to be of benefit to others, I could feel that it worked. And generosity, I could feel that it made me happy. So I began to practice like that. And I felt that I was authorized to teach others because I practiced it and I could see that it worked. And the other thing was that I looked around. Ever since I was a child, I could see that there's nothing but suffering here. That suffering is all pervasive, and even when it's temporarily alleviated by some kind of temporary happiness, it's all pervasive and it returns. And the suffering is primarily spiritual. So I said to His Holiness, that being the case, I felt I couldn't wait. I felt I just had to, if I knew something, anything that would help, I better do it. So I asked him, therefore, if these things have just come up in my mind, this practice of generosity, this meditation on emptiness, this chud, where does it come from? And he said, well, and I said, and by what authority am I passing this out? I mean, how is this happening? Why doesn't it happen to everybody? What's the answer? And he said to me, you were a bodhisattva in the past so many lifetimes, and you accomplished your practice, and he spoke of mindfulness, and he spoke of awakening and stuff like that, and he said, you accomplished your practice to the degree that it is mixed like milk with water in your mind stream. You are not separate from that. In every future lifetime, when you appear, you will remember the teachings. You'll remember them because you've practiced them so mindfully. Now you know what that tells you? Do you hear what that tells you? I'm not different from you. I use deodorant. I stink when I sweat. I am not different from you. That tells you that according to His Holiness, a living Buddha, this practice of mindfulness is so potent, so perfect, that if you really invest all that you have into it in an honest and deliberate and profoundly deep way, you can take it with you. To think that that is the one treasure, the only treasure that we can take with us when we die. You can't take your car, can't you take your TV, can't take your boyfriend or girlfriend, husband, wife, kid, can't do any of that. Even if you and your whole family died together, you can't take them with you. It doesn't work that way. But that profound recognition, that habit, the constant making of that habit of recognition and mindfulness, that you can take with you. So I'm asking you, I'm pleading with you, don't practice like a robot. Practice deeply and mindfully every minute of your life. If you can only start with just moments of recognition throughout the day, start there, even one. It will increase, I promise you. It's like building muscle. What a noble and honorable way to live. How amazing. Rather than to just cling to our egos, constantly define it, and react to everything else. You know, practicing that way, and practicing some sort of profound recognition, some sense of the sacred, I mean, is it a real choice? You can see that one life is so much more precious than the other, so much more meaningful, so much more profound, so much more useful for sentient beings. So I hope that you will, in your practice, begin to institute a way to be mindful not only when you're sitting down. You know, sometimes we're not even mindful when we're doing our sit-down practice. But to not only be mindful and stretching for that sense of recognition when we do our practice, by really nicely accomplishing the visualization and really discovering its meaning, but also in our lives. To recognize the nature of appearances, to recognize that everything is the face of the Guru. Everything is an opportunity to practice. That's maybe a little deeper than walking around saying, everything is beautiful, everything is love and light. And the result looks real good on you. So I hope that you will practice in that way. I invite you to go deeper and deeper every moment. As a practitioner, every moment that you live with this consciousness, with these precious Dharma teachings in your hands, each moment is like a package, like a gift. Each moment is like a Christmas present, you know? Most of us have them and we just squirrel them away. We just take our moments and we collect moments. And we move through linear time collecting moments. But as a practitioner, you can open that package. Each and every gift has Guru Rinpoche's face in it. Each moment, as a practitioner, has the capacity in it, the ability, and the responsibility to move into a state of recognition, to awaken. When you find that you think, oh, some of these monks and some of these nuns, they're not so good, and now I'm really pissed off at my teacher because she moved to Sedona, and then, oh, you know, and not only that, but it's my week to clean the bathroom. You know, and you think things like that, and you have these ideas about how it should be and why, you know, I'm going to judge this and I'm going to feel bad about that, and I'm pretty sure that she's got bad qualities and stuff like that. You know, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're practicing the mandala of self-absorption. You're putting that ego right in center stage. How amazing instead to turn it around. And should you see something that you have some reaction to, question your perception. Question the depth of your practice. That's where you have potency. That's what makes this practice of Buddhism so amazing. Is that the ball is in your court. The practice is in your hand. You're not waiting for salvation. You're learning to recognize it. What's so potent and so powerful about understanding that is that no one can take that away from you. There is no power that can take recognition away from you. No power that can take the face of the Guru away from you. So I hope you will include this in your practice. I hope you will walk a sacred life. Whatever it takes to remind you, walk a sacred life. Walk in recognition, not in ignorance. When you use these practices, use them throughout all of your experience.
Is it dark and